Right here we have the pre-algebra toolkit on integers and fractions. So before we get to adding and subtracting integers, we need to know what happens when we encounter two negatives. So anytime you have two negatives in a row, it will equal a positive. A negative times a negative is a positive, or a negative divided by a negative is a positive. It's kind of like flipping a light switch. If you flip a light switch off and then on, it will go back to its original state. So each negative is like a flip. So when we have one negative, we'll flip the sign to negative, and then when we have a second, it flips it back to positive. So that will come in handy when we see problems like number 7 and 8. So first let's practice. If we have a positive and a positive, it stays positive. A positive and negative turns negative. A negative and a positive turns negative. And here's that situation. We have a negative times a negative, it will end up being positive. Same thing, same pattern holds for division. A positive divided by a positive is positive. Positive divided by a negative is negative. Negative divided by a positive is negative. And a negative divided by a negative is positive. And then we can put in those answers: 30, 30, 30, 30, 5, 5, 5, 5. Okay, now when we add and subtract integers, the first thing we're going to do is plot the first number and then move to the left or right depending on the second number. Now, if the second number is positive, we'll move in the positive direction to the right, and if the second number is negative, we'll move in the negative direction to the left. So let's try that. This first example starts at 2, and it moves 5 to the right. So we're going to have to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. Ends up, the answer is 7. For the next one, we also start at 2, except this time, because it's plus negative 5, we're going to move to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That ends up at negative 3. And for number 3, we start at negative 2. We move 5 to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ends up at positive 3. For number 4, we start at negative 2. And we're moving 5 to the right. 1, 2, or left, 3, 4, 5. We end up at negative 7. And that's with addition. Now with subtraction, it's the same thing. We start at 2 for the next one, and we move 7 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That gets us negative 5. Start at negative 2, move 7 to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Gets us at negative 9. Now here's a potentially tricky one, number 7. We're going to start at 2, but because it's minus a negative, that turns into a positive, and we can move to the right 7. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, to arrive at the number 9. And lastly, we're going to start at negative 2, but because it's at minus a negative 7, that becomes plus 7, so we're going to move to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, to end at an answer of 5. So that is how you add and subtract integers. Now for fractions, anytime you add them or subtract them, you need a common denominator. And then once you have that common denominator, you can add or subtract the numerator on top. So in this first example, we have 1/6. We're going to have to turn that 1/3 into a 6, so we can times it by 2 on the top and the bottom to get 2 over 6. Now we can add the numerators to get a 3. The bottom stays the same at 6, and we should reduce it to be 1/2. For this next one, finding a common denominator between 4 and 5, we should use 20. 4 times 5 is 20, so 3 times 5 is 15. 5 times 4 is 20, so 4 times 1 is 4 on top. And we can subtract the numerators to get 11 over 20. For multiplying, you just multiply, multiply the top numbers and then multiply the bottom. So the top numbers multiply to 15, the bottom numbers multiply to 24. You can reduce it because 3 divides into both of these, and that reduces to 5 over 8. For the next one, 2 times 11 is 22, 7 times 4 is 28, and because we have a negative fraction multiplied by a positive, you know that the result is going to be a negative. Now again, this reduces. You can divide by 2 on the top and the bottom to get negative 11 over 14. Lastly, for dividing fractions, you need to multiply by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of the second number. So the reciprocal is when you just flip the top and the bottom. So this turns into 5 times 4 over 1. So notice that we're now multiplying instead of dividing. And notice that we flipped the second fraction, 1 over 4, to get 4 over 1. That's the reciprocal. And our answer would be 20, or 20 over 1. For this next fraction, we're again going to take 6 over 5, and instead of dividing by 7 over 10, we're going to turn that into a multiplication of 10 over 7, and that'll be easy because we can just multiply across the top to get 60 over 35. Just so happens that 5 divides into both of these, so we can get a 7 on the bottom and a 12 on the top for our answer.